I'm gonna try to go without the mic for a little bit, just because I have to use this clicker to kind of direct the slides, and I might need to stand over here a little bit to keep that connection. So if you can't hear me back there, just let me know. But I think I should be able to project enough to get everyone in the room. So thank you today for asking me to speak. Emily's been a friend and a client for a long time. She's actually one of my first clients. And so since I started Spare Law Group back in 2011, we've worked with a lot of different wedding planners, and other people in the wedding industry, photographers, some event spaces. Even after this past hurricane, had some people whose weddings were kind of messed up because of the hurricane that came to us and looked at the situation. So today what we're gonna do with this talk is kind of just go through a few things issues that we see in running a small business, running a sole proprietorship, running an entity of your own, and what things you might face. And the issues you're going to have. And one of the issues I might have is trying to connect to my laptop back here to control this presentation. So just bear with me for one moment. I didn't realize I'd be standing way over here. Okay, maybe we're there. All right, there we go. I'm going to try to stand over here so I don't break anything. So yeah, as I was introduced, I started the Spare Law Group in 2011. And we like to say we help small business owners avoid legal pitfalls and help them when they fall in. A lot of times it's the helping them when they fall in, because they don't come to us to help us avoid those legal pitfalls. But something we really specialize in is looking at a business and trying to look at it from every angle and figuring out what issues they might face and trying to avoid those issues. Because a lot of times in business, if we can help you avoid an issue, we're going to save you thousands, tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars with a little bit of preventative work. I'm also a bit of a tech nerd, so when these things are working, it usually looks pretty good. So today, just to go over some of the topics we're going to talk about. First, we're going to talk about your business structure and what that should look like as somebody who's self-employed in a small business sense. Then we're going to go over hiring help. What happens when business is so busy that you need to bring somebody in and you need an assistant or somebody else. We're going to look at the insurances you might want to consider having in place. What are the different kinds? What do I need to insure? What's out there? I left drafting clear contracts to the end because I know that was one of Emily's big concerns, and I thought I would put that towards the end because I figured we'd get a lot of Q&A on that. And then if we have time, at the end we'll also go into building a brand. What does it take to build a business that can live beyond you, that can go past you? What are you building? What are you protecting? So first, we're going to start with business structure. And just out of curiosity, how many people in here are self-employed in the industry in some way, shape, or form? So maybe 60% of you. I'd say for anyone almost everyone in the wedding industry, photographers, event rentals, wedding planners, decor designers, almost all of you should be set up as an LLC. The difference between an LLC and operating under your own name just in a proprietorship is the limited liability that actually comes along with that. And so to explain this concept, I like to use the idea of a bucket. When you set up an LLC, you're building your business around the idea that you're putting all the assets of the business into this bucket. You're putting in your cash, you're putting in your insurance policies, you're putting in the intellectual property and the brand that we're going to talk about later on, and you're putting everything in there. So that when a bad situation happens, when somebody slips and falls, when a bride wants to blame you for something went wrong in the wedding, when a hurricane comes and the wedding is canceled and it's a mess, and they sue you, you want them suing the bucket. Because at the end of the day, a plaintiff in a lawsuit, when they sue an LLC, can only seize the assets of the LLC. They can only seize the assets of the business. That's the limited liability. If you're operating under your own name as a sole proprietorship and someone sues you, they have access to all your personal assets, your house, your car, your retirement accounts, right? If they sue you and there's a judgment against you and there's no insurance for that, they can come after anything you own. If you're married, they can go after your spouse's assets as well. Whereas with the limited liability company, if somebody sues you, that liability is limited to the assets of the company. So the benefit there is that you limit your losses to whatever the company has. A lot of times the company's only going to have some money in the checking account, some camera equipment, maybe some event rental equipment. There's not going to be a whole lot of assets there, so you limit that liability. The other benefit of an LLC is you make a good first impression, especially with the higher end clients. Right? This sounds small, but it's a small cost to make. If somebody's going to shop around and they're looking for a business and they're savvy about this kind of thing, they're going to look for somebody who's set up as an entity. Who's got an LLC? Are they protected? What does this look like? Rather than just hiring an individual. And if you think about it, I'm sure you can see it in your own lives too. If I hire this person, am I hiring an individual or am I hiring a company? A lot of times you're kind of hiring a company that is an individual, right? So it's hard to blur those lines, but especially for somebody coming from out of town or somebody that doesn't know better, that LLC can kind of give you that good first impression. So the limited liability is the main aspect, but making this good first impression is going to be secondary as well. And then I also wanted to talk about tax benefits, and I had a slide, but honestly, this whole new tax law is kind of doing this whole head-spinning thing, right? I'm sure you've heard about pass-through entities and the 20% deduction, and is it above the line, below the line? I tried to look it up last night, and for those of us who are self-employed, just wait for CPA guidance, right? The Tax Act that was just passed in 2017 affected pretty much everyone who's self-employed in some way, shape, or form, but the CPAs don't even know how it's going to affect us yet. So you don't need to go rush and ask your CPA yet, right? This isn't going to affect us for about a year when we actually have to go file our 2018 taxes. But in the past, if you've heard somebody say, the slide was going to talk about being an S Corp. An S Corp is a tax election, and under the old tax law, there were advantages to having an LLC that was taxed as an S Corp. So you weren't setting up an S Corp, you would establish an LLC and elect to be taxed as an S Corp. And there were tax advantages there, and that's kind of what I was going to talk about here, but the new tax law changed that. So just kind of know at the beginning of next year, you're probably going to want to talk with the CPA, hey, I'm self-employed, how should I do this, how should I organize this? Right now it looks like the tax community is kind of waiting for the IRS to provide some clarification on the new rules that are in place and how that's going to look. So business partners, right? Business partners in the wedding planning industry. One of my kind of niches and specialties is helping people create partnership agreements. A lot of times people say, they come to us and say, oh, we need an operating agreement so that we're protected in this partnership. And an operating agreement is, my analogy for that is that it's like a safety net if you're a trapeze artist in the circus, right? It's something that's there to catch you when the worst happens. But it's not something you want to ever actually use. It's a bad thing if you use it. That means you've gotten pretty far down the line. You've slipped, you've fallen, you haven't been able to recover from that. So that's a niche I've gotten into because I've realized a lot of attorneys don't draft good operating agreements. But the problem with partnerships is that a lot of times the fights between the business partners really don't have anything to do with the legal aspect. It's, hey, I am busting my butt and I've gone to every wedding we've held for the past 12 months and you haven't made them all. I'm out here, I'm pitching clients, I'm doing marketing, I'm building the website, and you're not doing that and you're benefiting from that. I'm working until 8 o'clock on a Wednesday night and I'm not going home to my family, and you are. More often than not, the fights we see between business partners have more to do with the management of the company and the practical aspects of being in a relationship with somebody than they do the legal aspects. In law school, we were taught breach of fiduciary duty and duties of loyalty and all these fancy legal terms that have to do with what your legal obligations are to a business partner. In practice and in working with closely held companies, businesses owned by spouses, businesses owned by friends or people who used to be friends, we don't see those very often at all. Oftentimes, it's just more the practical aspects of running a partnership that people seem to get in fights over. So business partners in this sense, again, I'm having some issues connecting again, but my recommendation to you as business partners is you can almost not have a partnership. I almost don't see a reason for, in this industry, to really go and engage in a business partnership. And I'll tell you why as soon as this thing connects. But The partnership, unlike a wedding kind of takes a lot of effort to put on, right? As you all know, there's a lot of planning. It's a lot of money to get involved in. It takes a step to get married. There's a big thing there, and we know how high the divorce rate is, right? With a business partnership, it's a simple handshake. We can create a partnership here today with, let's set up this partnership, and here's $100, and now we're 50-50 in this thing, right? It's very easy to get into a partnership, but setting it up the right way so the partners agree is way more complicated, probably than even getting married. So we see a lot of partnerships split. We have a lot of people through that. And my advice, if you're going to look at a partnership or how to set it up, is before you actually say, hey, you own 50%, I own 50%, set up your own individual businesses and work together on an as-needed basis. So if it's two photographers and you want a partnership, rather than forming a partnership, say, hey, we have our own individual businesses and we'll put this agreement together where if we need coverage for one another, we're gonna help one another and we're gonna work together on this particular wedding. Same thing with wedding planners. Rather than going into a partnership with somebody, have someone who's that close confidant, and you each have your own businesses, but you work together on an as-needed basis. So you can tout that to clients too, is, hey, I have these partners, I have these folks that I rely on a regular basis, and they're very much like business partners, except you don't have all the practicalities of splitting the business and equity and roles and responsibilities and visions, and how do we get out of this if things go wrong, and what are the provisions for death, divorce, yada, yada, yada. So I'm happy to go into this in more detail, but I think the idea here is before you go into partnership, look at keeping your businesses separate, but creating some sort of just very basic agreement that, hey, we agree to help each other when needed. So that was everything on business structure. Any questions on that before we go to the next topic?
Question. I've read that very closely held companies, just like one person as an LLC, don't get as much of the benefit of the liability protection. They can just come to you and say you're just a person. You don't have that benefit. Is that actually the case, or is that just for a...
Sure. So the question was, there's kind of a rumor, or you've heard that if there's one person in an LLC that you don't have that liability protection. Yes and no. There's kind of some smoke there to the fire. The issue with an LLC is if you're gonna have an LLC, you need to treat it like a separate enterprise. So your contracts need to have the name of your LLC on there. So just because you set up an LLC doesn't give you liability protection, right? Just setting it up alone doesn't really do anything. What gives you liability protection is when you set up contracts and that contract has the name of the LLC on it and your client is engaging the LLC. The client is paying that LLC. They write a check to that LLC. That LLC takes that money and deposits it into a checking account in the LLC's name. If the business needs to pay for business expenses like new cameras, new equipment, whatever it might be, the LLC is buying that sort of thing. And then you as the entrepreneur, you pay yourself. It can be as easy as transferring money from your business checking account to your personal checking account, but you're paying your personal expenses out of that personal account. So the concept you're referring to is called piercing the corporate veil. So if somebody has an LLC, so sometimes we've seen people just set up an LLC and their contracts are still in their personal name. That doesn't do you any good. If I have a contract with you and not your LLC, I can sue you and the LLC is worthless. If you're treating your LLC like your own personal piggy bank and you're paying your mortgage and your groceries and child support and your other needs out of that, then a court could pierce the corporate veil, as we say, and declare that that LLC is in fact that individual and the liability protection is gone. So it's not very complicated. Have that separate checking account. Make sure all your contracts say the name of the LLC. Get paid by the LLC. When you need to write expenses, write it out of the business account. And when you have personal expenses, transfer it to your personal account. Anything else on business structure? Yes, sir.
You mentioned that you didn't see a lot of reasons why to have a partnership. Is there any reasons that you've come across where you say, well, that is a good reason to create a partnership?
It really depends on the revenue of the company. If the company's doing more than $100,000 a year, more than $250 a year, you can invest the time and the money that it takes to do that the right way. And you really want to, I'm still going to probably try to turn you off to the idea and sell myself out of a fee. But in that sort of situation, it might make sense. To set up a partnership the right way, you're talking about a massive time investment, probably about 50 hours per partner, and several $1,000s is what we charge to get to a point where everything is written down and everyone agrees, right? So the business has to be able to sustain that, right? If you try to set up a partnership kind of on a shoestring budget and you're each putting in $3 to $4 grand into a business checking account and you're saying, oh, it's fine, we'll work it out later, that's usually where the problems come up, right? They never get around, partners never get around to working that out. They come to us and it's, hey, Andrew, I'm in this partnership with this person, what can you do? And in a lot of times, sometimes my hands are tied. I can't do anything for you. Either that or it's going to cost you a lot more money for me to get you out of it than it would be to just set up a new business. So it kind of depends on the size of the business. But the reason I say that in the wedding planning industry, I don't really see a whole lot of partnerships needed is that a lot of it's your own personal, you are the business, right? Your knowledge, you are the person. So as that service-based business, you don't really, so lawyers have partnerships, right? But I specialize in business. Somebody else might be personal injury. Somebody else might be bankruptcy. There's different specialties there, so it makes a little bit more sense. And we have ethical rules that make it way more complicated too. But from a planner perspective, it's something that I would avoid. And maybe the real kind of point of this is heed caution and go into it intentionally, rather than doing the, hey, here's $100, let's split this business 50-50 and move forward. Anything else?
So does the LLC only protect you against people you're contracted with?
No, not necessarily. As we'll get into insurance, not just if you're contracted with, but if you have a contract with somebody, they're going to sue the other party to that contract. Right? So if you individually are the other party to the contract, you and all your personal assets are open up to lawsuits that revolve around that contract.
Right. I guess I'm just worried about like other vendors or guests, people not contracted with.
Right. Yeah, I mean, if you're operating, if you go the route that I was kind of describing earlier of everything is operated under the business, everyone is engaging your business. If you're paying vendors, or if you're just holding yourself out there as doing business under the LLC, so that third-party vendor. So if you're what part of the industry are you in? Photography. So if you're kind of engaged by a wedding a bride and you're dealing with a planner, but you're holding yourself out the whole time as having this LLC, I think that planner is going to have a hard time suing you individually for something, right? I mean, there's just unless you somehow evidence, put something out there that you're not operating under an LLC. Hey, I'm operating under the LLC. It was on my engagement letter with the client. It's maybe on my email signature if you want to go that far. It's on my contracts. It's on my letterhead. It's on my website, right? If you're holding yourself out there as that LLC, then that's how you're operating business, especially if, hey, this is what I always do. Clients are always writing checks to my LLC. There's no evidence there to show that you're operating personally under that. So could they? Yeah, maybe, but I think they have a harder time doing so in that situation. Anything else? While I wait for this thing to reconnect, as I'm getting closer to this. Okay, so I'm gonna keep moving closer to this laptop so this doesn't keep disconnecting on me. So by the way, if you want these slides, text WIPA NOLA to this phone number up here. It'll be on the next few slides, but if you want all this information and you want to stay connected with us, just text WIPA NOLA to 587-317, and what you're going to get is you're going to get a response back that asks for your email address, and we'll send you these slides as a PDF so you can download them and kind of follow along from there. All right, so the next slide, we're going to talk about hiring help. We're going to move on to that now. So when you're hiring help, you really need to decide between two types of folks. And this is really, I'm sorry, y'all, this is very annoying. Let me get rid of the fancy phone. Okay, there we go. This clicker, let's go just old school here. Maybe this will work a little better and give me some more range. Okay, so when you're hiring help, you have to decide, hey, how am I going to pay this person as a 1099 independent contractor or as a W-2 employee? And this is a big issue that we always get with small business owners because people tend to come into the office and they say, oh, well, I'm going to hire this person as a 1099. And people want to pay people as 1099s because you don't have to set up payroll. You don't have to pay a payroll service. You don't have to worry about taking out taxes. You don't have to pay workers' compensation. It's just a lot easier, right? Hey, I'm paying you $10 an hour. You worked a 3-hour wedding. Here's your $30, right? That's a lot easier than I'm paying you $10 an hour. You worked a 3-hour wedding. I got to put that into payroll. I got to deduct this. I got to deduct that. I got to get a bunch of forms from you. The problem with that is that as business owners, we don't get to decide how we hire those workers. That decision isn't left up to us. The IRS and Louisiana Workforce Commission, the state of Louisiana, essentially dictate if a worker works under certain conditions, then they're an employee. Otherwise, they're an independent contractor. So the state of Louisiana has this really easy 3-pronged test. And it starts out by saying it assumes that the person you're hiring is an employee, right? You start with that assumption, is that the person I'm hiring is going to be a W-2 employee unless they're free in the direction and control of their business. So they get to decide where they're going to work, when they're going to work, who they're going to hire, what they're going to do, how they're going to do it, what they're going to wear. They're going to bring their own tools. They're going to control the whole process. And they perform work that is not usually done by the business, so it's not an essential function to your business, or it's not performed on the business premises, and they customarily do it themselves, right? They're customarily going to go and do that on their own accord. If all 3 of these are met, if you can say yes, 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 then that person is an independent contractor, right? So let's go over kind of a few examples of what this might be. Right? If you're a wedding planner and you hire a photographer, I realize the bride usually engages this person, but engage with me here, right, on this. If you hire somebody, you're doing planning, you never really hire a photographer, but for whatever reason, this one couple wants to have you hire the photographer, so you decide to do that. You build it into your fee, you're all fine there. But so you hire this photographer and you tell the photographer, hey, I need you to come to the wedding at this time and date and take some photos. But you get to decide how the photos look. You get to bring your own equipment. So they just check the first mark, right? Because they're doing it under their own direction and control. The second part is met because it's not normally a part of your business, right? You're a wedding planner. You're not doing photography. This is something else. And the third part is probably met because that person, that photographer, is normally engaged in working with other clients and doing photos for other folks. They have their own LLC, they have their own occupational license. So in that sense, that person's an independent contractor. Now let's say you want a day of assistant to come in on a big wedding and help you out, right? It's booked in a room like this, there's several hundred people, and you just need an extra set of hands. Well, you tell that person exactly what to do, when to show up, what to wear, how to act, how to talk, what to do, who to respond to, everything, right? It's a part of your business, So they're performing work that's engaged in wedding planning, right? Doing all the air traffic control and moving things around and doing all that. And they're not doing that for other folks, right? They're only working for you. They're not engaged in the business of being a wedding planning assistant. They're assisting you on that day. So that person is going to be an employee, and you need to pay them as an employee. So some of the common mistakes that we hear, some of the things we hear when people say, well, I'm going to pay this person as a 1099, there's two really big things. Oh, well, they're part-time, or they're temporary. I'm only going to hire them on a temporary basis. But if we click back to those slides, three-pronged tests, whether or not they're part-time, whether or not they're temporary, has nothing to do with that test, right? So people like to say, well, they're part-time. Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, because I'm like in my situation, there's a florist who's independent, and she jobs herself out to different people, and I do stationery, and sometimes she comes and does work for me, and I know that she's not paid as an employee for the other places that she goes to. Like she herself is a florist, but then if there's larger jobs that other florists have, she'll go to that florist and help them with that. Or sometimes she comes in, works, does stationery stuff for me. But she's not, she's definitely like not like she's like the seasonal person. So like she might come in like 1 or 2 days a year to somebody.
Sure.
So that would have to then be an employee, like a W-2?
Well, does she as a florist have her own LLC?
I don't know if she has her own LLC, but she has her own.
So to back up out of this, she has her own business. If she has what Louisiana Workforce Commission, one of the objective things that they look at when they're trying to figure out this test is they look to see if that person, that florist, has their own LLC and has their own occupational license. So the way around your situation is to say, hey, I want you to come work for me. Do you have an LLC? Do you have an occupational license? Well, let me pay your LLC. My business will pay your business, and you come work for me. And that's the way around it. To give you kind of a horror story from the summer, this is the whole avoid legal pitfalls thing. We got a phone call from a cabinet store on the North Shore. And they were a cabinet store that were selling cabinets, and they had people who were going out and installing those cabinets. Well, Louisiana Workforce Commission periodically audits different transactions, different businesses, because they want to make sure that businesses are paying them the right amount of unemployment insurance and the right amount of state taxes into the system. So this business was audited, and several of their installers didn't have LLCs, they didn't have occupational licenses, they didn't have their own insurances, they didn't have any of these things that showed that they were actually engaged in a business. So Louisiana Workforce Commission came to this cabinet company and said, you owe us $35,000 because you've been paying these installers as independent contractors, when in fact they're W-2 employees, because you're telling them where to go, what to install, how to do it, exactly what it looks like. They don't have their own businesses, they're not customarily engaged, they didn't meet any of these tests. And the business called us and said, what can we do? And we went through this and I said, I can't really do anything for you. I'll take a retainer and try to go make an argument for you, but I can't promise that I'll actually reduce it because you violated the law. So it's something that can kind of come back and bite you, but I think that's kind of a good way around the problem, is if the florist has an occupational license, and she should, if she has an occupational license, and she should, if your business pays her business, now it's two businesses engaging together, and I think you get around that problem.
Okay. Yeah, I have a band, and I employ many people. I can see both sides of this, and let me explain. Some of my members have their own LLC, so it seems to me they would fit squarely under this as a subcontractor, correct? Okay. For those who don't have their own LLC, I tell them, show up at the job at a certain time, wear a suit. What suit is up to them. They bring their own equipment, but they use my monitors. Okay, so there's a combination of their equipment and my equipment that goes into performing this job. It's not on our premises, it's always at a hotel somewhere. But they all make a living as musicians, not just with me.
Right.
They also have the ability to sub out on a job at any time they want. So they make the call, I'm playing on this job, or I'm not going to go play, with my own band at this time or whatever. So does that fit squarely under a subcontractor or what?
I think so, because you kind of just said it, right? They have the ability to sub out, so they can leave at any time and decide a job, take a job if they want. They clearly don't make money just from that one band,
Okay,
right?
So even though I tell them what to play and what to wear and where to be there, they can show up wearing whichever suit they choose, and they can, even though I say play Brown Eyed Girl, they
Right.
can play however they want to. They have artistic expression.
Yeah, I think it's, there's not really a bright line rule in all these situations, and I have a hard time imagining that members of a band have to set up payroll and LLCs and all that sort of thing. So I think I'd feel comfortable with the LLC setup. The kind of main point I wanted to bring up here was definitely for the planners who bring assistants in. That was kind of the main issue that I could see, is bringing somebody else in. Even if it's somebody who's just working, not even on the day of, but somebody who's working in the office and answering phones and checking the mail and responding to email, right? That's where, well, this person's just gonna come in part-time and temporary, and they're gonna answer emails during the spring when I'm really busy. I'm just gonna pay them as a 1099. Or people like to make up other classifications. W-2 and 1099 is it. There's no such thing as interns or volunteers. Volunteers is not a thing. You're a for-profit business. If somebody's volunteering for you, that's a violation of the Fair Labor Standard Act, and they can come after you with a wage claim. Interns, I'll mention that briefly. With interns, it has to be for the benefit of that person, so they can't be fulfilling a normal job responsibility that you would have. So if you would normally have a day of assistant, you can't fire that day of assistant and bring on an intern. If you had a day of assistant and you have a college student who wants to be your intern, and you add them on and you're kind of having them do things that normally you wouldn't have somebody do, you could probably get away with that. But for an internship, it has to be for the benefit of that individual, and they have to be fulfilling a function that normally wouldn't be fulfilled by a staff member on your team. In other words, they're not augmenting your staff. They're coming in and almost think of an intern as a burden. If that person is bringing a lot of value to your business, they're probably an employee that you need to pay. If they're kind of being a burden and you're doing it for their benefit, and they're taking up your time and you're explaining to them and you're teaching them to legitimately teach them, then you can probably get away with calling them an intern. So some of the, like I said, the common mistakes, hey, it's only part-time, it's only temporary, here, there's all the time, I'm gonna pay them as a 1099, no, it's a W-2, even if it's 1 hour, once a month, you gotta set up payroll and pay that person as a W-2. So some of the scary consequences here is really the big one to me is there's no coverage for injuries. We're going to get into insurance for this, but let's say you have, again, I'm going back to the big example of this day of assistant. This person's running around, she's wearing high heels, and she slips and falls and really messes up her ankle and has like 20 grand in medical bills for this ankle, right? What is that person supposed to do? In a normal employment relationship, the employer is going to have workers' compensation. And so that employee is able to make a claim under workers' comp, and they'll be taken care of and cured, and there'll be benefits there. Well, a workers' compensation policy if you're paying someone improperly, that person might not be under the actual employment, under the workers' comp policy, even if you have it in place. Right? And some of the fallacies we see is, well, I don't have employees, I have all the independent contractors, so I don't need workers' comp. Right? So you don't even have workers' compensation coverage. So there's no coverage for them there. And any of your other insurance policies, a general commercial liability insurance policy, the slip and fall coverage, and we'll get into insurance, usually excludes injuries to workers. So it says, we're not going to provide coverage for anyone who is working for you because that should be covered by workers' comp. So the big reason that you want to have this person, and this is what I tell people is, look, I know this worker wants to be paid as a 1099. I know you want to do it, but you don't want to be in a situation where this person is hurt, has 5 figures of medical bills, and their only recourse is to sue you because they can't pay their medical bills. It's either sue you or declare bankruptcy. Right? So workers' comp, actually, if you think about it from an employer perspective and taking care of your employees, hey, I want to make you an employee so I can pay workers' compensation, so if something happens to you, you're covered and you don't have to go against your own health insurance. So that's the big advantage of that. Wage claims, there's been situations in which, from the tax standpoint, when you hire somebody as a 1099, they're paying about 16% taxes on that. When you hire someone as a W-2, that 16% is split between the employer and the employee. So because the person is a 1099 and they're paying higher taxes, they can sue you as the business for the difference between those two. So that would be a wage claim, and we've seen that not in really the small business setting. We've seen it a few times with doctors who sued hospitals who were paying them improperly. That's an action for past due amounts as well. They come after you for that. And then the state, like I said, that $30,000 penalty, they'll come in and they'll penalize you with $500 per instance per worker. And then there's some other fines that we really haven't seen imposed, but hey, you can be in prison for 90 days if it's bad. And then the big one, if you do any state contracts, which no one in this room probably does, or maybe you do, but you can't get a state contract for 3 years. So either way, this is a big pitfall because, like I said, it's really easy to say, I'm going to pay you as a 1099 because it's number of hours times what I'm paying you, here's your check. But there's a lot of pitfalls there, and that's a pitfall that once you fall in, I can't really do anything other than say just write the damn check and pay the state off. So mitigation, pay the workers properly, right? Look at the workers that you have, think about it, bite the bullet, set up payroll, get them on there. The other option is this is why staffing agencies exist, right? This is the whole point of a staffing agency, is that a staffing agency takes all this HR off your shoulders. So if you hire event rentals and you need 20 people to go set up something one day, if you hire 20 people that one day to set up this wedding, then, like I said, they're not, even though they're temporary, even though they're part-time, you're gonna have to set them all up on payroll and pay workers' comp for all that, right? That's a lot of just overhead for that 20 people on one day. Whereas if you go to a staffing agency, yeah, you're gonna pay overhead to that staffing agency to set it up. But that's the whole point of a staffing agency, is I go to the staffing agency and I say, I need 20 people for this one day, and they say, okay, here's the 20 people. The staffing agency is their employer. So the staffing agency is worried about the workers' compensation and the paying the right taxes and the payroll and all those sorts of things. So really the two things you can do is go through a staffing agency if you need to hire those workers on a temporary basis or just pay them properly. And whichever one you do is kind of up to you. So any questions, any more questions on hiring help, bring people into the business?
Good question, but concerns over injuries on the job, does that still apply if you're a business and your contract, you have your person that you're bringing in is operating under their own business? Is that?
No, because technically they're under their, so if you're the photographer, right, and you hire a second shooter, and maybe is that the fact pattern? So you hire a second shooter to bring them in, then and you're hiring their business, technically they're under their own insurance at that point in time, right? They're now under their own policy. So that's one of the benefits of hiring somebody who's another photographer who has their own LLC, has their own occupational license, hey, is all that covered? I mean, you could even go as far as, I'm not going to hire you unless you have, can I make sure you have insurance? Because I don't want to be in a situation, a lot of times people sue, you read these lawsuits about people suing businesses because of injuries. They're suing because their backs are against the wall, right? They're suing because they have a very high amount of injuries, of medical bills, and they can either declare bankruptcy or they can try to sue someone and not declare bankruptcy and get their medical bills paid, right? That's what's happening a lot of the times in personal injury lawsuits. So in that situation, you can kind of protect yourself a little bit better. Hey, do you have health insurance? If something happens in this situation, are you going to be covered? And just make sure that that person has recourse so they're not coming after you. It's not required, but it's not a bad business practice. Anything else about hiring help, assistance? Awesome. So now we will talk about insurance and what you should have and what you might expect and what might be there. So first of all, why insurance matters. Everyone, I don't need insurance. What is it? Why, whatever. The big reason insurance matters is paying your legal costs. If you're sued or if you're in a situation in which insurance might kick in, your biggest expense is going to be paying that lawyer. Those legal costs, our defense costs, for us to get into a situation where somebody engages us, a lot of times you're talking about a minimum of $4,000 to $5,000 for us to just look at the facts and figure out what the heck is going on, right? Not to resolve anything, just about $4,000 to $5,000 to just get in there and figure out who said what, did what, what's going on, what are the issues, what are we actually looking at here. And a lot of times that's what an insurance deductible is going to be. So one of the main reasons you have insurance is that if you have to make a claim, that insurance company hires a lawyer on your behalf and is able to pay those fees. That's in addition to paying any judgment that's rendered against you or your business rather. So that's the main benefit is those costs, those fees. General commercial liability insurance is something you should probably all have. It's kind of just the general, most basic kind of insurance you can have in place. And I'm going to go through these next 2 slides kind of just to bring awareness to this. At the end of the day, people ask us to look at insurance policies and this and that, but I can't fix your insurance problem, right? Only your insurance agent can. So if you need a good business commercial insurance agent, we can refer you to somebody and send you to somebody. But at the end of the day, you know, if you go to one insurance agent, maybe go to 2, ask them to compare the policies, explain what's going on to them. You know, I can read your insurance policy and say you're not covered for this, but I can't rewrite the policy. I can't issue insurance. I can't fix that problem. So this is the problem we really just bring awareness to and tell you you need to go talk to an insurance agent about. So a general commercial liability insurance is going to cover things like slip and falls. It may cover you in situations in which you're sued because the weather is bad or because somebody gets sick or something along those lines. Maybe a vendor doesn't show and the bride's really upset that there were no tables at the wedding and they sue you because you were supposed to do that. Your general commercial liability insurance may provide coverage for that. Some other insurances you might want to look at if you have a lot of equipment, a lot of rental stuff, a lot of inventory, then you want insurance on that. What happens if it floods, if it burns in a fire, if it's damaged there, right? You got 40, 50 grand in inventory, it's not going to be easy to replace. That's what property insurance is for. Inland marine insurance sounds really weird, but it covers, typically insurance says, where's your stuff that we're insuring, right? Think of homeowners insurance. Where's your home? We're going to insure based upon where your home is and what its flood rating is. Business insurance is also going to say the same thing. Where's your business? So if you're in the wedding industry and you're moving around a lot and you've got equipment, AV equipment, if you're in a band and you're moving around a lot, you're in a lot of different locations, the inland marine is typically an insurance policy that will cover things when they move from place to place. So that's a policy to ask your agent about and make sure that you're covered, not just if this stuff is in the warehouse, but if it's at the Ace Hotel or if it's at the Troubadour or if it's at any of the other venues you might be at. Errors and omissions insurance, let's say you make a mistake and you book the wrong band or you just totally mess up the day on the contract with the venue, you make an error. Errors and omissions insurance will cover that. So that's something to look at. And then a business owner's policy sometimes rolls all of that into one as well. So again, these are all just kind of different insurances. Really sit down and talk to your insurance agent. Make sure you quiz them. I recommend the folks over at Gillis Ellis Baker because they're not trying to sell you insurance. They're trying to make sure you're covered. You have coverage for the event. A lot of insurance agents are just going to try to sell you a policy. We're dealing right now with a lawsuit where a gymnastics instructor bought insurance that excluded gymnastics. And it was kind of bought from a small dealer out in Southwest Louisiana, and we're looking at this like just what you didn't help this person at all, and now a little girl, 8-year-old, got hurt, broken arm, and there's no insurance, and it's a mess. But having a good insurance agent on your team who understands this is important, and you can go down this list and say, hey, what about this? Why do I need this? Why don't I need this? Right? Make them explain why you don't need it. And if they don't really understand these things, then you might want to go talk to somebody else. But like I said, most insurance agents are willing to sit down with somebody for free, review the policies and the coverages you have, because they're going to look for deficiencies, because if they find deficiencies, they sell you a policy, right? So they're really good in that sense of giving you that free insurance review. And like I said, workers' comp. If you've got employees, you got to have workers' compensation, and that's to protect injuries against those folks. So wedding insurance, I think, is a really interesting thing and comes up in situations when a hurricane comes and cancels a whole weekend, right? Or you have to move things around, this or that. I think wedding insurance, especially for planners, is something you need to have an easy way for your clients to purchase that, right? I think as a planner, you really need to position yourself in a situation in which you say, clients, you're coming in, you explain what wedding insurance is. Hey, if you need to cancel, if whatever, somebody gets sick, somebody dies, you're paying a lot of deposits here. If you lose all this money, your only recourse might be wedding insurance. So things, not just telling them, But explaining to them what they are and then having an option, hey, go talk to so-and-so over here. They can sell you the wedding insurance. And a couple things to go even further than that, you can require your clients to have wedding insurance before they even hire you, right? So if you're doing a lot of high-end weddings where folks are spending, I guess $50,000 probably a low number, but if you're doing higher-end weddings where folks are spending six figures, you can tell your clients, I'm not going to work with you unless you even purchase wedding insurance. And to go a step even further than that, I haven't seen this done yet, but you could potentially even build it into your fee, where you're not even going to hire me. Yes, ma'am.
What is typically like the range for the wedding insurance?
I'm honestly not sure.
Like 300 to 500.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. Yeah.
Right. When you're spending
For how much in coverage?
Starts at 25 and goes up from there. And we did actually have to use it, Rob and I, for the hurricane weekend. And my client, thank God, had it because when it became category 2, we pulled his tent down. And I, along with the venue and Rob, made that decision. We didn't discuss it with the client. Well, afterwards, she's like, I didn't use the tent. And we're like, well, we set it up, we took it down, it kind of became an issue, but her insurance did cover the cost of the tent.
Awesome. So, it's nice to tell your clients, hey, I'm glad you have it. It's even if you're
Look at building it in there, that's a really good idea.
yeah, just build it into your insurance.
Does it cover things like stationery?
Covers you can choose either liability or cancellation, and it's pretty inclusive from what I can tell. We did have to show a lot of documentation to get reimbursed, but luckily we had that, and so it wasn't an issue. And we use the company WedSafe. We recommend all our clients use WedSafe. WedSafe.com, yeah.
WedSafe. Yeah, and you could, so you're doing stationary.
Right, because like that weekend I had to things got jumbled around, so like programs that all had to get reprinted with like new dates, if they
Right.
moved the time around. And so that's, I've delivered, I'm so sorry, this is no longer useful.
Right.
I'm not reprinting for free.
Yeah, I think another idea that we were talking about before the presentation for breakfast is you could almost make your own insurance policy too. If you charge people every booking, hey, do you want to spend an extra $20? And you pay this $20, and if you have to cancel, I'll redo your stationery for free, right? So you're not working with an insurance company, and you might have to do a little bit of, actuarial science, kind of just some basic math, right, to make sure that you don't get hosed on the deal, right? How many weddings do I do per year? How many are going to get canceled on average, right? How many people will accept? Okay, so 90% of people will accept this $20, and I'll have to redo.
Like self-insuring, got it.
Yeah, so you could, which might make more sense in a stationary or in one of the very specific florist stationery. If you're doing a smaller piece of the pie where it's not worth to go buy insurance and you don't have the leverage that a planner would have to require the insurance. You could offer that as a product and say, hey, I'm going to sell you this. It's $20, and if you cancel the wedding, I'll reprint, I'll redate and reprint. But if you don't purchase this, then and we'll get into clear contracts, then that's it. Like no changes, right? So you could self-insure. So I think this is a really interesting idea of building it into the fee as well. If you can get that close relationship with a wedding insurer and just figure out, hey, how much of this is going to be, and then just build it into your fee. So that way that they're purchasing wedding insurance because they're paying you for it when they make that first deposit. And then you go and purchase it on their behalf, and then you're not stressed out in a situation of, hey, you're never having that conversation with a couple, right? I make you buy wedding insurance, and so if we take the tent up and take it down, you're not stressed about, oh my gosh, did they actually purchase that wedding insurance? Is this going to be a pain in the butt now? We'll take it down, we'll make a claim on the insurance, it's okay. It could be seen as, I think, one of those value adds that you bring to your client, and I think the higher end clients would probably appreciate that. I'm spending.
Andrew, I know we're getting short on time, but
Yeah.
I want to ask you about this because one thing as WIPA that we want to do is encourage people to have proper licensing and insurance. And in our industry, we see a lot of problems with that because you can just decide you're going to be a planner or a photographer or whatever and go start business without needing those things necessarily. And so a lot of people don't have it. Well, one of the things we discussed as a board is having venues, which is really common in other major cities and places, to require all vendors have their own insurance and that the venue is then listed as, a whatever. What's the benefit? Because it's a little scary for venues to jump on that board now people across the board aren't really, I mean, some hotels require it, but as a general rule, venues don't.
Right.
What's the benefit for a venue to do that, to kind of, have people working in their properties that are properly insured?
The license and insurance it kind of goes back to the example with the kitchen setup, right? If I know you have a right license, you're paying your taxes, I'm not dealing with somebody, it eliminates the liability that might come up in an awkward situation, right? I mean, I guess that's the answer, right? If you're working with somebody who's uninsured, in the situation that you asked about, Michael, that was, the photographer who gets hurt and they want to sue somebody, they're going to go after an insurance policy. Right? I mean, when somebody's hurt, that's who they're going after. That you want to go after a lawyer tactic, a plaintiff tactic, is let's find the biggest insurance policy and sue everyone with an insurance policy. And if you don't have an insurance policy, I don't really want to sue your LLC that owns some used wedding equipment and has a few $1,000s in cash in the bank, because that's all I can collect. I don't want your used wedding equipment. I want to get paid for my injuries. Right? So the insurance, having a venue require the insurance is a benefit, because the venue now knows that if a bad situation happens, somebody else's insurance might pick up the tab. Not just theirs. So that's a good idea, especially for planners, is, if you're going to build a referral list, a bride comes to you and they need stationery, they need a photographer, they need event rentals. If you're a planner, I would consider, building a database of, do you have an occupational license from the city of New Orleans? Do you have insurance? And send me those things updated each year. And that's a value add you can bring to your couples. Is, hey, the vendors I'm going to refer you to are all going to be licensed and insured, and you know that because I verified that for you. So that's a kind of an easy thing that you can do to build your own value in your business. And make sure you're covered. And I don't even know if you need to have the venues require it, right? If enough planners in this room decide that they're only going to work with other vendors who are licensed and insured, it's going to fix itself.
Our planners is the problem. So some are going to go directly to the venue and work with them directly.
Yeah, and that's just a situation in which, if somebody gets screwed, they're going to, that's it. You can't really solve everyone's.
Anybody who's worked out of town before, I mean, we were in Las Vegas last year and had to increase our liability from 1 to 3 million to work there because it was a requirement. So
Sure.
I think it's becoming more common, just not necessarily as much here.
Yep.
Since a lot of planners and photographers in particular, but also other vendors happen to work from home as opposed to having a place of business, which insurance policies do you recommend for those individuals, given that they most likely won't need, for example, the general commercial liability or business property rather?
You still might need general commercial liability if you're for slip and falls. So you rented the venue and you were there and somebody slipped and fell. I wouldn't say that you don't need it just because you're working from home. I wouldn't. Inland Marine is you're working from home and you have a laptop, but you take it to the coffee shop to go meet a client and it, I don't know, has coffee spilled on it at the laptop or at whatever. Something happens at the coffee shop. Typically, insurance is only going to cover that thing when it's in a certain location, right? And chances are you didn't put the address of the coffee shop on the policy for that thing, right? Or you're working from home and a laptop might be a bad example, but you have tens of thousands of AV equipment, right? It would cover it when it's at that other location. Yes? Question? No? Just a...
Going back to what Emily was talking about with having venues require insurance, how would you recommend doing that on the front end? Sometimes we don't know who the vendors are until we dive for it.
I mean, that's kind of just client wrangling, right? I mean, it's client education, I'd say. In that initial meeting with the client, explain the benefits of insurance. Hey, we're in an area that's prone to storms and hurricanes and hard freezes and a lot of weird things. You might get sick, your mom might pass away, something might happen. I think as the business owner, you can explain those benefits of insurance.
I guess I mean the vendors are licensed and insured.
How do you make sure they are? I think it goes with, you explain to your clients why that's a benefit to them, and then put the impetus on them, and you can hand them a list and say, hey, look, these are the folks that I know are licensed and insured. If you want to go find a third party, then just know that if that person isn't licensed and insured, you might lose out. And that's kind of goes into contracts. You can kind of write that into the contract as well as, hey, we're providing a list of folks that we know are licensed and insured, or maybe you can go to the WIPA website and find people who are licensed and insured.
Because everybody who becomes a member of WIPA has to be licensed.
So, hey, you can go there, but if you want to go find, so-and-so's flowers and, go find your own thing, know that this is a risk. So I think a lot of people just don't know when they're picking a vendor that that's actually a thing. Right? So if you let them know that I think it's almost as the planner, as their friend, as their helpful organizer there, let them know that that actually is a thing. So I know we're close on time here. If we've got a couple minutes.
Yeah, we want to talk about contracts.
Yeah, we'll go through contracts. So the goal with contracts is to set clear expectations, right? Is to make sure everyone knows what's going to happen in every sort of situation imaginable. Lawyers thrive, and where we make money in litigation is when there's gray area, when there's areas of uncertainty. When I'm reading a contract, I'm not necessarily looking for legalese or special words or anything in particular, that there's no magic language, as I like to say. I'm reading a contract to see if I can interpret that in different ways. And if I can read a contract and interpret it in two conflicting ways, that's not good. Right? That's where disputes happen, because now one party is going to interpret it like this, the other party is going to interpret it like that, and the only person that can make that decision as to how to interpret it is a judge. And getting to that point is expensive. So the goal of a contract is, again, don't think of it as anything too crazy here. There's no magic language. There's nothing terribly advanced, but it's setting clear expectations. It could be, one of the clear expectations is, I want you to work with somebody who has insurance, and this is one of the issues you could face if you don't, right? You might lose money if something happens and you're working with vendors who aren't licensed and insured, right? That's good contractual language that explains to somebody what's going on. Other clear expectations, I don't want to text message at 3 in the morning, or it's okay to text me all the time. Or if you're going to text message me, text message this number because it's the office line and my staff can answer for you, whatever it might be, right? Those are all things to build into a contract. Anytime you want to set these policies, procedures, expectations you have, that's the point of a contract, and to eliminate that uncertainty. So some of the terms you want to have in your contract is what are the scope of work? What are you actually going to be doing for this person as clearly as possible, detailing line item by line item what you're actually going to be doing. The benefit of that is it helps you price it as well, because if you know exactly what you're going to be doing, you know what you're not going to be doing. And that scope of work helps as well, right? If you have different levels of services, you might say, hey, in the scope of work you're getting A, B, and C, but by the way, you didn't buy the platinum package, so you're not getting D. That's down here. That's in the did not order part of this. So when that bride comes back and says, where's my photo book? You say, you didn't pay for that, right? You're able to point to that contract and that scope of work and define what's going on there. Payment terms and deadlines, what's going on there? When do you expect payment? What are the deadlines? Again, being as clear as possible. Right? It's better to be clear and make it sound rude or strong or strong-armed than it is to be kind of loosey-goosey on it and not be clear, right? And be nicer about it.
I always find that clients, though, respect when I'm clear about that, and if they try to change it and I say no, which I almost always do, that they always still end up hiring us, because it's almost like they see us as more legitimate, okay.
Yeah, that's a good point with a good contract too. I've looked at a lot of contracts. So when we do a contract, though, we make sure that we try to make it look as professional as possible. Where the numbering and the font and the design, and we want it to fit on 2 pages, and we want it to make it look as professional as possible. And if you think about that, compare a nice, tight, 2-page contract that's front and back versus a contract that you get in a Word document with some like weird font and it's all off. It could say the exact same thing, right? But your contract's also the chance to make a first impression with a client. If a client's trying to choose between 2 vendors and they get one person who sends them this nice, tight PDF with a request for a digital signature and it looks good and it looks professional, and somebody else sends them a Word document that's got this funky font and it's 8 pages and it reads funky and it's weird, who are you going to choose? Right? It could be the same exact language, but just because one has that professional appearance, it's really one of your first sales things that you're going to give to a client, right? So that's important as well, is having it look good. Yeah, payment up front, there's no reason that anybody should be paying any of you after the fact. We'll just leave that at that. Hey, 30 days before the wedding, everything is due. If not, then I'm not delivering, or more time if necessary. Cancellations and refunds, be clear about that. I've got a couple examples we're going to go through. Is be clear in which situations you're going to issue refunds and what happens in a cancellation, right? Think about every scenario possible and read through your contract and make sure that's addressed. Just because you say no cancellations, no refunds, doesn't mean that you can't say, oh, I'm really sorry, I feel bad for you because this storm came through on a Saturday and I'm gonna go above and beyond to kind of help you out of this situation, right? I'm not trying to screw you here. I'm just saying that if your wedding is canceled because of a storm and you wanna move it to Nashville, Tennessee, I'm not giving you a refund. But if your wedding is canceled and you want to move it till 3 weeks and that's open for me, I'll accommodate you. But still your contract needs to say, if you cancel, no refunds. And that's a good point to explain too, is hey, I'm not going to give you a refund, but that's why you should have wedding insurance, is that if it's canceled because of the weather, that's what this is for. So unexpected events, put those in there. Again, draft this contract, talk with friends. You want to put everything in there. The goal is those clear expectations, right? So in this situation, this is what the contract says that could happen, and that's going to put everyone's mind at ease, even if it's not a good thing, right? I'm happier to know that this is a situation that I'm not getting a refund as opposed to it's loosey-goosey and I'm not sure if I will. And then for the photographers, the designers, people who are maybe laying out rooms like this, you probably want something in there that talks about how you own that particular thing until a certain point, right? I own the photographs until you pay for them. I own the photographs and your only right to use them is in this book that I'm providing for you. If you actually want to own them and edit them, I'm going to charge you more for that, right? Or folks who are doing layout and design. We'll get into an example of that, but I own that design. And that way you can't have me drop the design and then not pay me and then fire me and then use my design. Because we'll kind of get into brand, but that's your intellectual property. And you want to make it clear that you own this thing that you're creating for somebody until they pay you or until that trigger happens where they've satisfied their end of the deal.
Sorry, Andrew, I'm interrupting again. I just talked to everybody in this room and I know all these issues, and this
Sure.
recently has been an issue because people have like, okay, here's our design or here's whatever it is, and it's been taken to other companies who then, okay, well, we'll do it for you, but we'll do it for 5,000 less or whatever the situation is. How can you protect yourself, other than writing it in the contract when that happens? I mean, it's an ethical thing, and the people who are doing it shouldn't be doing it, but they are. So.
Right.
I mean, I'll tell you my experience. I had somebody take my design and then they went to like a different printer and had them do it. And so I actually sent a cease and desist letter to the other printer because they knew better, So even though it cost me more money, like I set the precedence, like you don't take my stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that's one way is a cease and desist, but the way I think that the better way is have that contract is, we own the design, and once we provide you with the design, if you decide to take it to somewhere else and you use this design to do printing, then I'm going to simplify this, you're in breach of this contract and we're going to sue you for the full value of what we quoted you, right? So the process there is you have this written in your contract, you give the client the contract, they sign, they're agreeing to those terms, they give the contract back to you, you give them the design maybe before they've issued full payment for everything. They've paid a down payment or.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Just again, all these people I know.
Sure.
So a lot of times this happens for people like Luminous or Florist or Firefly where they haven't actually had the people sign the contract.
This is part of our sales process. It's
It's
like
a sales process.
there's that gray area because you're creating
That proposal.
a proposal, you're creating a vision. You don't want to give too much because they can take it and run with it, but you've got to give them a little something so that they will pick you, and then they have the right to take it and go somewhere else because that somewhere else is like, oh, you want 5,000 for this? They want 5,000 for this? I'll do it for 2.
But as a rental company, I've even had planners come to me, they want a design, they want to know where the tent's going to fit. Then they take my design,
Right.
and then they go to another company. And it's part of the sales process. You have to say, this is what we can do, this is what we manufacture, this is who we
Like
are.
you don't want to give too much, but you have.
So
I think it's a business process, and what you need to think about is that sale not just costs you the sale, but it costs you money to produce that, right? It costs you money to sit down and take time with that person and explain all that. So not only did you lose the sale, but you didn't just not make money, you lost money, right? So when you think about it like that, now in the sales process, you say, okay, for instance, with our sales process is we charge $299 for an initial consultation so that I don't waste all that time sending you proposals and this and that you take to somebody else. So you're paying us for that. So you could charge for an initial consult. I think one way of kind of addressing that is change your sales from here's what I will do for you to here's what I've done for other folks. And I'm going to design this for you, but if I'm going to take the time to design this for you, you've got to engage us. And you can even build your contract that says, hey, the first stage is the down payment, and it's $500, and here's what I've done for other folks. If you like this and you want me to do it for your location, your tent, you pay me $500, and I'll give you this design. And that way, they've paid you for the design at least, right? Now I'll design something for you and I'll give it to you. And if you go with somebody else because they're cheaper on the full deliverable, that's fine. At least I made $500 for that, or whatever that number might be. But I think it's more of a.
And I think that's another situation where if it became
I was
standard.
gonna say, I think we'd all have to be on the same page. You know, Ashley's gotta do that, Jen's gotta do that, you gotta do that, I gotta do that. If I'm the only one doing it.
It's across the board, it doesn't matter.
Wait, what'd you say?
I said, if we're all get on board and decide to do that, then across the
Exactly.
board, then that's what they're doing.
Exactly, it's gotta
And
be
I'm
industry
so
standard.
I'm so tired of doing stuff for people and then turning around and being.
Well, I think.
Someone else because they were less expensive.
Right.
I mean, I've been thinking about that initially.
I think you're going to run into problems with that because you're never going to get everyone on board, right? There's already going to be some evil actor.
Well, there's going to be the person who actually what he says on Facebook, she doesn't pay tax or
The
insurance, so
quality
she
group
can charge
is
less.
gonna do it.
Right.
I think if the core people, I mean,
I think what's taken me is a long time to realize is that sometimes, it feels bad to not do that sales pitch with that client, or it feels bad when you explain when you change your process to protect yourself, right? Let's say that client comes to you and they like your past client designs, right? But they decide not to pay you the down payment for you to do your design. Well, you just say you're no longer in the red, right? That's the thing. That's the mindset. Is that you're just you're losing less money than you would. So in a sense, you're gaining money by actually losing that client. So getting everyone to comply is just going to be that.
There's probably, maybe 10 core florists, there's probably 4 or 5 core candle companies, and I think we've all been in this business long enough that we could all kind of sit down together and go, okay, this is what we're going to do, and if we all stick to it, and I mean, it's going to be an ethical thing, but I think if we all stick to it and just say, this is what we're doing, and this is just the end of it, we're tired of being pitted against each other, we're tired of wasting our time, then I think that's just the way it happens. Huh? I mean, there's 170 something plans. I think we're all in that same boat, right? Right, and I guess you're right, maybe we do, so I mean, I guess it's one of those things that, I don't know, I mean, there are so many planners, there are so many floors, so many different places. The least expensive they are, yeah.
So. So in my experience, though, when you set these rules on a client, the crappy clients weed themselves out really easily. That's the beauty of a process like this, right? If somebody comes to you and you've got a beautiful packet of things that you've designed for other folks, including other designs, maybe even designs that you know aren't going to work for their situation at all, and you give them that, and then you give them your contract, and it says, hey, for us to do stage one is a few $100, and we'll give you this design, and they say no, don't think of it as you just lost a sale. You just avoided a really crappy client, right? If that person really is price shopping for the bottom of the barrel, yeah. So it's not. This is where when we're doing business law, this is why we only do business law. This is a business process problem. This isn't a legal problem. Right, so the business process is getting that person involved with you, engaged, and hey, if you give us $500, then guess what? That $10,000 fee we're going to charge you is $500 less, right? So it has the added benefit of they're already in bed with you, and they're going to want to not forfeit that $500. Or if they do forfeit that design fee, well, you were just paid for it. You know, you weren't paid the full amount, but you were paid for it, and you avoided a client who's probably going to be more trouble than they're worth anyway. So that's all, that was all that. I don't know what bullet point that was under. Signing on behalf of a client, don't do that, right? Don't sign contracts on behalf of a client. You need some special agent mandatory language in your.
We have, by the way, for people whose contract are signed.
Yeah. So you need some, if you're going to sign, if you're a planner and you're going to sign a band contract on behalf of a client, you do need some special language in your contract with the client to make sure that the band doesn't come back and sue you when something goes wrong. So either have some special language, and I forget what it is, it's probably something I can provide for free, I'd be happy to do that, or just don't sign on behalf of clients. Clients, if you're going to engage a band, you're going to sign this. I'll set up e-signatures so you can sign if you're remote or whatever it might be. But I'd either say avoid signing on behalf of clients, or have a lawyer review your contract first to make sure that it has the right language so that you don't get stuck in the pinch there. Some of the other terms you're going to want in your contracts, put amendments in writing, right? Everything's got to be in writing. Writing is fine. Email is writing. Text message is writing. Right? Facebook message is writing. As long as it's in writing, any changes to this scope of work got to be in writing. Change of date, you know, that's a really easy one. Have something that's very clear and concise if somebody changes their date. What happens? Revisions to deliverables. What happens if somebody wants to change something? What are the deadlines to do so? Hey, you want to change something 48 hours before your wedding? That's a pain in the ass for me. I'm going to charge you extra for that. Fee for revision, same thing. What am I going to charge you? What are the deadlines for that? Policies for contact. You know, if you contact me at 3 in the morning, I'm not going to respond because I don't wake up till 7. Right? The more you're putting in there, the better, the more professional you're going to look. And I think the better client you'll have. Out-of-pocket expenses, what if you expend those? How is the client reimbursing you? You know, are you collecting kind of a security deposit or something against that? That's something else to think about. Okay, so go through some bad examples. These are actually some contracts. I've kind of removed names, but some issues that we've brought up. So up here you'll see that this was for a florist. So the total balance was about $6,300, and they paid a deposit of $3,000. Well, the remaining balance is due ASAP. What the hell is ASAP? Right? If I'm the florist, ASAP is yesterday. If I'm the client, ASAP is whenever the hell I feel like it, right? So that's not a clear expectation. And then down here, you know, they say final payments are due exactly 1 month prior to the event. Well, then why the hell do you say ASAP up there, right? It conflicts with one another. So me as a lawyer, if I'm reading this, this is a mess. You know, where do you stand? And that's where I have to go to my client and say, this is going to be expensive to litigate because we've got to decide which term is right. I think another thing in here, if the date of the event is changed, you will lose the deposit. But it doesn't really say, and if you read through this, what if a storm happens that morning, and these are flowers, so I know that you already bought the flowers and took the time to arrange them and started shipping them, but the morning of a giant storm comes through and I can't use them, well, what the hell happens here? And if you read through this contract, it's just not clear what happens. Right, so that looks bad on you as a business, makes the bride or their parents or whoever it might be, your client, stressed out because now they need to go hire a lawyer to interpret this. And as a lawyer, I say, I don't really know how I can help you here. It's just not a clear contract. And you as the vendor, it kind of puts you against the wall because now, you know, you might get a bad review against you because you didn't accommodate this person and you didn't have a clear policy in place that says if the date of the event is changed, you know, less than 36 hours before the wedding or whatever timeline you need to adjust, you lose everything. You know, so have wedding insurance, right? So I'm not sure how this one actually was resolved, but I know that I'm pretty sure the wedding couple wound up paying more money for flowers, and they weren't happy with this particular florist. So yeah, what if it's canceled day of? So just again, an example of this isn't clear, it's gray, it's uncertain. Looking at one more. In the event that either the planner or the client force majeure, if something happens, a war, or weather, a hurricane, then what does this contract say? Blah, 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 we can't do it. This agreement of services may be terminated by either party without penalty. What the hell is that? It doesn't even address the deposit or the cancellation, right? It doesn't go into any of that. And so this is, again, that uncertainty, that gray area. You leave somebody out in a, as a client, I want to know what happens. Even if it's a bad thing, I'm happier to know that it's a bad thing than to look at this and be like, what do I do here? Then what? Refund, return of deposit, what's going on here? Maybe terminated by either party without penalty. Do I just not owe you? Do I just get to cancel my wedding that morning and now I don't owe you anything? Do I get a refund? I terminated it. You didn't deliver the day of services, right? It opens up a whole world of things. These are some bad things. If the wedding is canceled, refunds are limited to earned fees, funds in excess of unused or non-refundable fees, and out-of-pocket expenses. Well, none of those things were addressed in the rest of the contract, right? And this was a contract that you can tell that somebody just lifted off of somebody else. They searched wedding planner contract on Google and decided that that was useful, right? So if I'm reading through this and in the whole four corners of the contract, if something doesn't make sense, that means it probably shouldn't be in there. If it doesn't make sense to you, then don't keep it in there just because you found a contract that had it in there and you think you need to leave it. That's almost worse. Because this just doesn't, again, reading the whole contract, what the hell is unearned fees? I don't know what that is. And then acts of God, if there is a hurricane, then I will only require payment for the time actually spent planning your wedding. What the hell is that? What's your hourly rate? How much time have you spent? Who keeps track of their time in this industry? Yeah, no one, right? So this is just a bad clause because it's unenforceable, right? There's no, what are you going to do? Go back and make up an hourly rate and then times it by the amount of time that you spent? No, this just isn't good either because it's in there, but it doesn't really provide any sort of benefits. So some good examples, event insurance. We recommend event insurance, and we don't provide any refunds if it's canceled. So event insurance is a good idea to have, right? That's very clear. Cancellations. Cancellations made more than 30 days prior to your wedding will not be refunded. All right, again, very clear. There's no ifs, ands, or doubts what that says. It's very, no legal special language. There's nothing fancy there that I learned in law school, other than that's short, succinct, and very to the point. Another one, acts of God. If there's a storm, no refund will be offered. So there is this little kind of caveat that says, yeah, we're not going to offer you a refund, but if we're available, we'll help you out. We may do that. Or cancellation again. If you cancel, no refund will be given. Right? Very clear and to the point and explains it. And in my experience, people are much more comfortable with this kind of strong arming than they are with the uncertainty of a friendlier, less complicated, easier contract. I think there was something else there too. If couple cancels this agreement prior to making all payments, we reserve the right to seek payment for all services. So that's kind of some language that I think we put in this contract that went back to the what if they take our design and we help them and they don't make that payment. Well, if you cancel and you go work with somebody else, then we're just going to try to sue and enforce this contract. And I don't think that's how to happen too often, but it gives you that option, right? That's an option where you can decide as the planner, oh, I am going to sue this person or I'm not. So I think we're to building a brand, which I can go through quickly, or we can take the time for questions.
I'm sorry, but we're probably gonna have to cut it off because we only have like 8 minutes. But maybe if you don't mind sticking around and talking to anybody,
Yeah,
questions after.
sure.
that'd be okay?
Yeah, I'll stick around. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
You're so knowledgeable, y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
So if you have more legal questions, I encourage you to get in touch with Andrew because he did write my contract. He
location, because we want you to feel like it's where